Okay, I know this is what you guys have all been waiting for. Not the last day, the Q&A. That's what you're waiting for. We had about 43 questions. Lori and I split them up. We kind of fought over who wanted to do them, and we both wanted to, so we decided we'd divide them so that it was even. I'll start with the first half of the questions, and then Lori will come up. If you have any questions, raise your hand. Lori will bring the mic around so that everyone can hear the question. Our first question was, how long do W-4s need to be retained for employees who no longer work for the county? IRS Publication 583 states, employment taxes, if you have employees, must be kept all employment tax records for at least 4 years after the date the tax becomes due or is paid, whichever is later. Again, if you need more information on this, you'll need to contact the IRS or go to their website and find a contact for any of those IRS forms. Same would be for Department of Revenue forms. Those are their forms, so you'll need to contact those agencies. The next question is there a preference or a requirement on using blue ink or black ink? According to Indiana Code 36-2-17-2, black ink shall be used. The next question, we are reevaluating positions within the county for a variety of reasons and believe that the sheriff's bookkeeper has been treated as a Class 2 when perhaps they should not have been. Are all the sheriff's department employees considered Class 2 regardless of their title? Is this guided by the county or the state statute? And if the bookkeepers have been treated as Class 2 as far as sick days, vacation days, etc., does that mean their classification should not be changed? The response to this is we're going to provide the Indiana Code. Classifications for Sheriff's Department employees are addressed in Indiana Code 36-8-10-10, and it states, police officers, classification of ranks, grades, and positions and appointments. Subsection A says, except for the position of chief deputy, the position of prison matron, and in counties with a population of more than 50,000, temporary administrative ranks or positions established and appointed by the sheriff, with the approval of the board, shall establish a classification of ranks, grades, and positions for the county police officers in the department. For each rank, grade, and position established, the sheriff, with the approval of the board, shall, number 1, set reasonable standards of qualifications, and number 2, fix the prerequisites of training, education, and experience. I'm sure you guys were vigorously writing all of that down. You don't have to. We will provide these questions and answers in the upcoming bulletin, but feel free to write it all down if you'd like. The next question is, if a salaried county employee is also a committee or board member outside normal business hours that meets regular, say 4 times a year with a pay of $20 per meeting totaling $80 per year, currently paying through AP fund non-budgeted expenditures, do these employees need to fill out a W-9 for taxing with 1099, go through payroll, or something different? The answer is compensation paid to a county employee for serving on a committee or board should be paid through payroll system and included in a W-2. Of course, if you need additional guidance on whether it's compensation or not, you'll want to contact the IRS and give them your specifics to your county. But the key word to that response is compensation paid. So, the next question is, does every person need to submit a timesheet? For example, elected officials, sheriff's first deputy, jail matron, deputy prosecutor, deputy public defenders, and departments exempt from overtime. If a timesheet is not required, what is the rule of thumb for requiring them? Our position is related to the time records is documented in Indiana Code 5-11-9, and it states, A, the State Board of Accounts is hereby authorized to prescribe the forms of accounts and vouchers provided for by sections 1 and 2 of this chapter, and B, the State Board of Accounts shall require that records be maintained showing which hours were worked each day for officers and employees covered by section 1 or 2 of this chapter, and employed by more than one public agency or in more than one position by the same public agency described in 1 or 2. That second part basically says you may have an employee that does multiple jobs, and in those you have to keep time records showing the segregation of those jobs, which job they were working at what times. If a county employee works the polls for election 2 days per year, can they still be paid through AP, and do they have to be paid through payroll? I'm not going to read the whole response. We have included a lengthy response, but I went over this yesterday in our the payroll presentation for election workers. There is some guidance on our website and some more information on the IRS's website, but basically it depends on whether that county or that poll worker is a county employee, then yes, it goes through payroll, and if not, the IRS requires a W-2 to be submitted for any pay over $600 a year. So should claims and payroll vouchers be signed by the auditor prior to going to the commissioners meeting, or is it appropriate to just file stamp? We believe the board approval should occur after the claim has been audited by the auditor's office. The claims and payroll should be signed by the auditor prior to going to the commissioners. Indiana Code 5-11-10-2 states in Section A, claims against a political subdivision of the state must be approved by the office or person receiving the goods and services, be audited for correctness, and approved by the dispersing officer of the political subdivision, and when applicable, be allowed by the governing body having jurisdiction over the allowance of such claims before they are paid. If the claim is against a governmental entity as defined in section 1.6 of this chapter, the claim must be certified by the fiscal officer. The next questions, we had 3 questions that basically were the same. The wording was different, but the response or the answer is the same. So I'm going to read the 3 questions, and then I'll go over one response for all 3 of the questions. The first question is, if the highway department scans in and saves their stone tickets, do they still have to bring them to the auditor's office? Can they then discard the original stone tickets? The second question was, we scan in all of our claims after they have been processed. Do we have to keep the hard copy, or is the scanned copy sufficient enough? And the third question was, we scan and save a copy of each quietus, along with keeping a copy of the quietus drawer and a copy in a binder. Do we have to keep the hard copies if it has been saved in our computer? We also save the end-of-day report for the quietus in the computer. Do we have to save and maintain the hard copy of the end-of-day report? The response to all 3 of those questions is, the maintenance of records via electronic media is addressed in the April 2014 County Bulletin, which says, all transactions that occur in the accounting system must be recorded and accessible upon proper request. The transactions can be maintained electronically with proper backups, microfilmed, or printed on hard copy. These transactions include, but are not limited to, all input transactions, transactions that generate receipts, transactions that generate checks, master file updates, and all transactions that affect the ledgers in any way. The system must be designed so that the changes to a transaction file cannot occur without being processed through an application. The ability must not exist to change data after it is posted. If an error is discovered after the entry has been posted, then a separate correcting entry must be made Both the correcting entry and the original entry must be maintained. However, you may want to contact the Indiana Archives and Records Administration for appropriate guidance on sufficient preservation of certain records. How do the new Department of Labor overtime laws in effect December 1 affect auditors, chief deputies making less than $47,000 threshold? They now get overtime pay. I briefly went over this, and the one thing that we'll say is that it doesn't apply to elected officials. Anyone outside of that, if you have a question on whether it applies to them, again, you'll want to contact your legal counsel or the Department of Labor, Human Resources, and determine individually whether it applies to those. But the only thing that we'll say is that it does not apply to elected officials. And again, we have put some information on our website that you can review as well. Can DLGF please work with State Board of Accounts or state legislature so that we don't have to send Form 22s similar to NAVs now, since all will be in Gateway, and this is official method of DLGF? I believe Fred got asked this question yesterday, that do we still have to send the Form 22s with the disbursement? And his response was yes. That unit still needs that information, whether it's a hard copy mailed to them or you email them their Form 22, somehow they need to get that information. Perfect example, in the office we all share phone calls. Lori and I usually take the county phone calls, but when other directors are out, we get other phone calls. So I get a phone call from a township trustee. He's new, he's only had 1 year and he's doing his annual report. And he calls me and says, well, how do I know how to divide out my revenues? And I said, well, your records should tell you. And the next question was, do you have electronic or manual records? He said, well, we do them manually. And I said, well, when you write in, every time you get a distribution from the state or the county, you write down what type of distribution it is and the dollar amount. Well, I didn't do that. How am I supposed to know what that is? I don't know the breakdown of that distribution. I said, well, you should have got something for that. I didn't get anything. I said, well, they should have mailed you something or emailed you something. He insisted, I didn't get anything. I didn't get anything. I said, okay, call the county and ask them how they send it. Well, sure enough, the county says, well, we emailed that information. He goes back through his emails, and he calls me back and he said, I did get that information. I just didn't open the attachments on those emails. So they do need that information. Whether they pay attention to it or not is a whole other thing. But it's important for their reporting that they get that breakout of that information. At least that's the current position now. So, yes. That I really couldn't answer. I know that when Fred was asked yesterday, he said that you still need to be sending them that information. So I'm not sure that would suffice or not. I would just say go ahead and send them the Form 22 so that they have the information, but they may change the procedures moving forward. But according to Fred yesterday, he said send them that information. So. Can you itemize the State Board of Accounts invoices submitted to the auditor's office for payment for the audits for the individual government entities, rate of pay, and hours worked on the audits? We're currently working on, or at least up in our office, they're working on providing more details for that billing. But at this point, if you have any questions on your billing, just go ahead and call our office, and then they can deal with that on an individual basis. But they are working on the new bills for that. The manual states that an inventory should be performed every 2 years. What dollar amount do you recommend for the threshold on this? I am not referring to the fixed asset threshold, but inventory. We don't recommend dollar values. That has to be unit specific. And when I was out in the field, I would get a question like this of what do we inventory and at what dollar amount or what cutoff do we use. That has to be determined by your unit. An inventory and capital asset records are different. You can have a complete inventory of everything in your office down to your trash can, but not all of that goes to your capital asset records. So there is a separation of those. What you inventory and the dollar amounts that you inventory, that's determined locally. And then the process for doing that inventory and the comparison to the capital assets of what should be on there and what's not, that again is an internal process that you have to determine what works for you. The manual states that wrong question. Our county council and commissioner meetings are videotaped and available online. Will this videotape suffice as a meeting minutes? The video is an all-inclusive and some meeting minutes are very poor. This would save much time that could be used for other tasks. According to Indiana Code 36-2-2-11, it states in subsection A, the county auditor shall attend all meetings of and record in writing the official proceeds of the executive. So those do need to be in writing. What type of information can we require of vendors? Example, tax identification number, federal ID number, bank information for ACH payment, registered with Secretary of State, state ID, copy of bond. The answer is a vendor doing business with the county should be requested to complete a federal Form W-9 to provide the information necessary to prepare a Form W-9. This information would include business name, business organizational structure, address, and taxpayer identification or employer identification number. Additionally, if the vendor has agreed to ACH payment, you would be able to request the necessary bank information to process the payment. Beyond this, we're not aware of a need for any other information. The biannual business filing with the Secretary of State can be confirmed at their website for any business organized in Indiana. Should HR duties be separated from the auditor's office payroll duties? Should it be its own department? Again, this is something that has to be determined locally, whether the county is in need of or wants to establish a human resources department. It's completely the decision of the county themselves. Each unit, again, an HR department may be required for maybe a larger unit, whereas a smaller unit, they have no need for it. The staffing, there's a lot of considerations to that, so it's not something that we could answer. Our county applies for many grants through EMA, probation, health, etc. Is it allowed to require that they request administration fees for the auditor's office? We manage and maintain the funds. We should be able to receive reimbursement. If this is allowable, is there a specific fund that the administrative fee would have to be put in? It is allowable to request administration fees as long as it is an allowable cost from that particular grant. However, it must be approved in the grant budget by the grantor agency prior to the actual request. A claim should be submitted from the auditor's office against the grant funds for the administration expenses and then receipted into the fund where those expenses were paid from. Can court employees' salaries be mandated by the judge, or are they to be included in the salary ordinance adopted by the council? Court employees' salaries can be mandated by the judge through a court order. Of course, it would still be preferred that it's part of the salary ordinance, as the council's still going to need that information for the budget. However, in the absence of a court order, the salaries should be included in the salary ordinance.
Okay, my first question is related to the Lowett special distribution. Does the county's 25% have to stay in the rainy day, or can it be transferred to another fund through the claims process? For example, if the council wants to pay for a narcotics officer with some of this money, do I transfer or pay directly from rainy day? If the county's rainy day fund ordinance allows for these type of expenditures, such as pay for a narcotics officer, the payroll could be made directly from the rainy day fund. If the rainy day fund ordinance does not allow for this type of expenditure, the commissioners do have the authority to amend that rainy day ordinance at any time to allow expenses or allow the purpose of the rainy day fund to be amended to include other types of disbursements. As an added note, the 25% of the special distribution, the part that is not restricted, can be placed in the general fund or the home rule fund. It doesn't have to go into rainy day. So whatever is more convenient for the specific purpose you have for that 25%. We have a few taxpayers tell us the IRS is recharging them for state income taxes and that we need to recharge them for an eligible homestead. Should we go ahead and charge them? We usually let them prove their principal place of residence before we recharge them. This has come up before, I believe, if I'm understanding it correctly. The basic issue is they provided conflicting information to their county for their homestead credit and to the IRS for where they are residing for their state taxes. And probably at this point, the IRS penalty is a little bit higher than the ineligible homestead penalty, and so they're wanting to change the records to coincide. Deb said she had some discussions with Mike Duffy last year about this, and we are going to look that up and get the specific information to you on how to deal with this when it comes up, so watch the bulletin for this. Are type signatures sufficient for claim vouchers? How about stamped? And I think, and another question, Shannon already addressed this, but the State Board of Accounts is often asked to approve the use of rubber stamps or other devices for affixing facsimile signatures of public officials on claims, warrants, and other official documents. The decision as to whether or not the number of documents to be signed justifies the use of a rubber stamp or other device for affixing signatures must be made by each official. Since each official is responsible for that signature, a rubber stamp or other signing device should be used only under the closest personal direction of the official and must be properly safeguarded when not in use. So you don't want to just sit it out there for anybody to grab and use. And I actually had a taxpayer complain because they were not allowed to use the official stamp, and I tried very hard to explain to them it's not their stamp and they don't get to use it, so make sure you don't have it on the counter or out because that's your signature, so you need to have control of it if you decide to use a signature stamp. We have a property that's split into two new owners for Pay 2017. When the property is being billed under the parent parcel, both new owners are eligible to receive the mortgage deduction for their portions of the parent parcel. Our software company allows only one mortgage deduction per parcel. How do we decide which purchaser is allowed the deduction? There's a little bit more in this, and I'm not sure, you might want to check with DLGF. If both owners are entitled to a mortgage deduction, the software should not prevent you from allowing them what is they're illegally entitled to. Just the fact that the software won't do it, there's got to be a workaround or a correction that happens. If you're not sure if both of them are entitled to a deduction, then you need to check with DLGF and determine if they are both entitled or if one or the other is entitled. The HEA 1001, the 2008 HSC fund was closed. Where would we apply money from a refund that would have been receipted into this fund? We have some old yet legitimate refunds still being claimed. That fund was a property tax relief settlement fund. We have forwarded this question on to Fred, to the Otter State Settlement Division, and I will be working with him on coming up with an answer and getting it into our bulletin as well. I'm not really sure because that would have been state money receipted in to provide that property tax relief, and I'm not sure what you're trying to recede into it now. So if this was your question, we might need further clarification on exactly what's coming in that you want to put in that fund, and then where it should be put since that fund has been closed out. So if you're not here, then you're probably not going to get that, but if you are, let me know. Does a court order serve as adequate documentation for a claim? While a court order may serve as the legal authority to pay a claim, Indiana Code 36-2-6-2 states a person who has a claim against the county shall file an invoice or bill with the county auditor. In other words, the court should follow the same process as any other department. However, if the court refuses, we will never tell you to ignore a court order. We will never take audit exception to you following a court order. If this is a case document that you've tried to have the court follow up on the appropriate process and they refuse, any exception would be placed on the court, not the auditor's office. Are there any plans in the works to reallocate the workload of the BMV to an agency better qualified and equipped to get reports on the FTP side in a timely manner? If not, are there any plans to completely revamp the existing BMV? At the very least, is there anyone over the BMV that has the authority to direct them to respond to emails and telephone calls? I'll tell you if there is, it is not State Board of Accounts. And I think Fred, if this is dealing with that water excise tax, I think Fred did address this, that the auditor of state was not aware how bad it had gotten, and they are working with BMV to try to get that either more timely or for auditor of state to take back over that distribution. We can forward the information on, but we cannot force them to answer your phone calls. There was, as I said yesterday, and I'm not sure what effect it had, there was a 449-page bill in the new ledge this year on BMV, and I'm assuming their intent is that it will work better. So we may have to wait and see if that happens, but hopefully between what Auditor of State is working with on the excise part and what the new ledge is doing, that will clear up. But we can't beat them up for you, I'm sorry. Shannon and I are not equipped for that. Okay, do we have to keep copies of voided checks if we scan them in and save them on our computers? Part of the answer to this is electronic maintenance of records, and Shannon addressed that. I'm not going to reread that. The only other thing, there are actually 2 points. Debbie did say that she has been in contact with Kim at the Treasurer of State's office, and there is some new information on this specifically to that situation, voided checks, and so she's gonna check back with Kim and see where we stand on that and get that to you. The other thing I want to point out from an internal control point of view that's different than maybe a scanned claim or a scanned quietus, that voided check is an accountable item. You need to make sure that nobody is using that check. Scanning in the check and then not properly disposing of it or writing it off or making it unusable is going to be an internal control deficiency. So if you are scanning them in, make sure that you are accounting for them and taking care of them properly, that they aren't getting picked up by somebody else and converted. Or, I mean, we've had calls where people have taken actual checks and managed to change the payee and change the amount and get it run through and somebody cash it when you never even issued it. So the same issue is going to be with one of those because it's an actual check. So you want to make sure you have controls over that. Okay, this is back to the earlier one. Why is it taking so long to get the boat excise files? We received money for March but still have no files. We need to do this June settlement. It's like this each month, and again, Fred had that whole chart up there which showed what unbelievably staggering delays there were in getting that information out to you and how they now know that is holding up things, and they are trying to get that corrected. Our library is leasing a copier through Perry Pro Tech and owned by U.S. Bank Corp. And just received a monthly bill that had a property tax line item on it. U.S. Bank is requesting a personal property tax exempt form. I'm going to read the statute on this that our resource table pulled up, and again, as far as exemptions, final guidance, you should go to DLGF for this, so I'm just going to read the statute. I'm not going to interpret it. Indiana Code 36-1-10-18 states that structures, transportation projects, and systems leased by a leaseor contracting with the political subdivision are exempt from all state, county, and other taxes. However, the rental paid to the leaseor under the terms of sale is subject to taxation. Okay. House Bill 1001 deletes current law that allows funds allocated from MVH to be used for sprinkling, weed, and tree cutting, cleaning of highway, painting operations, and maintenance of traffic signals and signal traffic signs and signal safety zones and devices and law enforcement purpose. Provides that the county motor vehicle license, excise surtax and wheel tax, municipal motor vehicle excise surtax, and municipal wheel tax may be used for these purposes. If MVH cannot be used for these items, counties will be forced to adopt a wheel tax. County General cannot sustain these costs. Can we use County General? Probably not if they can't sustain the cost for these expenses. And can we use seeded funds for these expenses? We have been told conflicting answers. Are these expenses allowed to be paid from MVH? I reread House Bill 1001 last night at midnight, so bear with me if I missed it, but it was probably my third or fourth reading of that. I found nothing in that, the final draft of that House Bill 1001 that had that language in it, that those things are no longer considered maintenance of highways. The statute for MVH funding says that it may be spent on construction, reconstruction, and maintenance of roads. We would not take audit exception to those things. They appear to us to be maintenance of the roads. If there is a new definition out there in maybe an administrative or NDOT direction, I don't know of that, but if they're redefining what maintenance of roads means, I would need to see that. And so if there's something else out there coming out that your highway department has received, could you forward that on to us so we could research it? If the activities are still considered maintenance of roads, you can use your MVH, and there is an order in Indiana Code 815.5 that says what order to be used it is. Also, we have it in a county bulletin, and it comes from those motor vehicle highway funds that are funded by the gasoline tax, special fuel tax, motor vehicle registration tax. The other thing is wheel tax and excise surtax go into MVH. So if you can use those funds for the maintenance, they're already in MVH. And then finally, once you use those, you can use your LOIT, which now will become LIT, riverboat emissions tax, riverboat wagering tax, and finally, as a last resort, your general funds can be used. You would have to have sufficient appropriation in your general fund, and for seeded, you would have to have sufficient appropriation, and it would have to be part of the capital improvement plan that underscores your seeded. Of course, that plan can be modified if you need it to be, if the commissioners need it to be. We had another question, and I'm not going to read through it again on BMV. I get the impression that you're all pretty upset with BMV right now, so I'm not going to read it again, but it's not just one of you. We got several on that. Please instruct on how to show the Title 4D on the grant schedule. Our examiner told me once that I should never have anything in the expenditures. That's not true, so I don't know where that information came from, but I did it that way the following year and was told it was wrong, so you either misunderstood or you got wrong information. The grant schedule has both receipts and expenditures in it, and then you need to correctly document whether it's a reimbursement grant, you're paying the expense, proving that you've paid the expense and getting a reimbursement, or an advance grant, you're getting a sum of money up front and then dispersing it. And then the macro within the gateway system will properly put that into the CFA if you've coded it correctly. But put both your receipts and expenditures. You don't leave any of that blank. Just make sure you've coded it properly. They did research out there, so your direct costs and your indirect costs are reimbursement. The incentive funds are advanced. You just want to make sure you check them appropriately. The only thing that's different for 4D is that PCA is not included. It's not included on the CFA because it's considered project income. It is not considered part of the grant. The second part of that question, Are we to include the sheriff's cash book and recorder's cash book in the annual report? Sheriff's cash book, yes. Recorder's cash book, no. Okay. SCA 67 indicates that at least 75% of funds must be used for a designated purpose. Additionally, up to 25% may be deposited into the rainy day fund. One explanation is that the 25% must be used for the designated purpose. The other opinion is that any or all of the 25% can be used for other purposes. Which way is correct? Who decides if the 25% will be transferred to the rainy day fund? Okay, again, 75% of the special distribution, at least 75% for special distribution, is restricted to those transportation purposes that were outlined in the SCA 67 and will become part of the statute. The remaining 25% has no restrictions. You may use it on road projects if you want to. You may use it on any county purpose that you would use any other county funds for, general fund or rainy day. You may put that in your general fund. You may put it in rainy day, or you can do, if you have a specific, your county has a specific purpose for it, you can do a special home ruled fund, put the 25% in there to pay that special purpose. The county decides how to use that. We've had a lot of questions of who has the final decision, and hopefully the counties will work together. If you're modifying your rainy day ordinance, that's your commissioners. If you're establishing a home rule fund, that's your commissioners. You're going to spend it, you need an appropriation, that's your council. So everyone kind of has to work together to decide what you're going to use that 25% for, what fund you need to put it in, and get the appropriation for it. Will new debt reporting replace current debt reporting in Gateway? We, State Board of Accounts, have not changed any of our requirements for how debt is reported on your annual report. Nothing's changed for us. We did forward the question on the changes for debt reporting to DLGF. So if you're asking for them, if it's part of that new summary report that Matt was talking about, they will be answering that. But as far as State Board of Accounts, we haven't changed anything on the debt reporting. Other than being eliminated from the levy, what are the advantages and disadvantages of eliminating a solid waste district? So again, this is something that's going to be a county decision. Your county has to decide what's the best way to go with that. What that new ledge does before, up through the end of this year, you didn't have a choice. Your county had to have a solid waste management district. They're now putting that decision back to your county. You decide whether you want to continue with the solid waste management district or establish a new one, or you want the county to absorb those services. And then I'm not going to go through all again, we went through the presentation what has to happen if you dissolve it or you take over those. But that's a county decision. The pros and cons may be different from one county to the other, the size of the county, the amount that solid waste management district is doing, whether you want it to be a department of the county or a separate special district. All of that needs to come into play, and you guys are going to have to decide county by county. So we can't give you a definitive list of why you should or should not do it. Okay, I'm going to need some help on this. How many counties have a council administrator? And this position is basically the secretary to the council. We haven't heard of a council administrator before, and we don't know what authority that it's being established under. How many have a council administrator? Whew, okay. Two? Okay, so the first question is how many counties? It looks like of here, 2 of them do. The auditor's responsibilities are the auditor's responsibilities as they're set out in statute. Those aren't delegated to anyone else. They're your responsibility to do. I'm not sure, again, I'd have to see under what authority the council administrator secretary is, and they would, I assume, be carrying out some of the council's responsibility. Yeah, you want to give us some more, maybe we can talk about this.
Well, I can tell you a little bit about our situation. This happened about 10 years ago, and the council did establish a full-time admin position just for them. And when the person was employed in the auditor's office, when she left the auditor's office to work for the council, she took with her the responsibilities of appropriations and budget. And so I'm 17 months into my position, and I've brought this up a few times. And
When you say she took the appropriations and budget, I mean, the council is responsible for the budget, so what was the auditor doing? I mean, are you talking
She took
about
the
gathering the
roles-
information?
she took the roles of the auditor's office, those responsibilities for advertising appropriations, receiving appropriations from department heads, or additionals, requests for additionals, transfers, and then, of course, leading, gathering the information and initiating the budget process. Those are responsibilities of the auditor's office, clearly. And she took those responsibilities with her. And so in the spirit of internal controls, I am addressing this with the council. Their attorney knows that this is so. But as you can imagine, this is the council's admin. If a question is asked of the council, 7 heads turn towards their admin for the answer. That's the situation we have in our county. And so it's very sensitive. I'm sure there will be a lot of, there will be consequences of dealing with this, but it will be dealt with this year, and those responsibilities are coming back to the auditor's office. But I will need your help, so please.
Well, I am always available, and in any way I can help as you work
Yes.
through that, I will be glad to provide support for that, because you can't delegate if it's statutorily your responsibility. Someone else can do it, but you're still ultimately responsible. You can't delegate that away. So if they've
Right.
taken it without, I mean, you want-
The auditor at the
Was fine
time made
with it.
no objections,
Okay.
and he let it happen.
it's a lot harder to pull it back
Yeah.
after you let the horse out of the barn.
Right.
We have 25 council members, so they just basically set up the meetings, do the agenda, handle the expenses, to send them to AP. However, in Marion County, as you know, we have what they call Unigov, which is not unity at all. It's created another level. We have city, county, and then ad hoc departments now. So it's another layer of government.
Wow.
And the budget has been assigned to the Office of Finance and Management. So we're constantly, and the mayor in Indiana is over the constitutional offices, and it causes a huge, huge conflict. Now, I have a new mayor, and we've already started the battle on who does what. So, good luck.
Does anyone else have a?
Yeah. I will point out Lori volunteered for you to contact her with these questions.
Yes, I
so
said me, I didn't say Shannon, that's fine.
Everyone heard it.
Our county council was, it was about 10 years ago, had problems with an auditor in the past and had heard horror stories of councils not receiving the information they needed to make the decisions that they needed. There was some concern that a new auditor coming in might not be cooperative. And so at the auditor's request, the county council created a position that is hired by the council. It's a financial administrator, and she reports to and is supervised by the auditor.
Wow.
So I think it's worked out pretty
We are
good,
not going to
actually.
come in and take audit exception to who did what, as long as it's getting done. But if it's an auditor responsibility and it doesn't get done, it's going to probably fall back on you, Is it okay for the clerk's office to do their own 1099s instead of us doing theirs? We don't pay their attorneys, so they are not in our AP system. Okay, this totally freaked Debbie out. And I'm thinking I remember a few years ago, back when I was in the field, that when your attorneys, when the clerk collects attorney pays and then through the trust account and remits it, so the individual that's court ordered to pay the attorney fees pays them in through the clerk's office, and the clerk's office then remits those to the attorney. That the new IRS ruling was that they had to issue 1099s at the end of the year for every attorney, and I remember it was a big headache because nobody wanted to do that. But if that's the IRS rule, we're not going to take audit exception. If the clerk's office has the information and should be supplying those 1099s, that's fine. I mean, that you're responsible for anyone that the county pays as an employee. Or a contract laborer that you would have to issue that 1099 for. The clerks would then hopefully they have a way to get those remitted out. If I'm not understanding the question correctly, be sure and contact me, because I don't want to, I'm trying to interpret this where the clerk would be paying and it's not part of your AP system. So if anyone is the person who asked that here or have, okay. Final question, yay. We have many departments that their budgets are set up in the CAGIT fund, which will now have to be budgeted into the county general for 2017. Will these departments be allowed to obligate funds from 2016 CAGIT to 2017 county share? Okay. I'm going to try to break this down again. The 2017 county general budget will include all of the 2017 local income tax certified share revenues. So what used to be CAGIT, now that's local income tax certified shares, that's going to come in and be budgeted as part of your general fund. Now again, that's not your economic development or seated, it's not your public safety, it's not your special legislation, it is just those certified shares that can be spent on any county purpose. At the end of the year, you may or may not have a balance left in those CAGIT or COIT funds that had the certified shares or distributed shares. You can decide, we are not going to take audit exception on this transition phase. You can decide whether it's easier if you have money, you know there's going to be money in that balance and you want to budget that money for 2017, you may do that. If you want to transfer it into the general fund and put all of the budget in the if that's easier, do it that way. I'm not, what's going to work best for your county. If you're talking about obligating or encumbering, the rules for encumbering would be the same as far as if you have 2016 expenses that you are legally allowed to encumber for 2017, then you would encumber it. So I'm hoping I'm addressing all of that, but do what's best for your county. Just know that your 2017 budget is going to include your revenues in 2017 from local income tax certified shares. Okay? Any questions? Before Shannon and I, oh, so close.
Does State Board of Accounts have any idea when they're going to audit our county? We have 2 years, and it's already halfway in the year. I'd hate
There's
to
a
do
lot
3
of-
years. It's going to be too
Yeah, there's
hard
a lot
enough for
of
2
counties
years.
in your boat. What they are working on now is this year the priority is switching. Tammy is over the audit side. And what she said, the priority this year is switching over to getting the counties caught up, because there are a lot in that situation, and we will be doing 2-year audits to try to do that. And exact timing, they don't run their audit plan past us. So, a lot of times we know someone's there when you call us and say somebody's here. So we're not the best source of that, but they are working on that. Counties are a high priority this year, and they are trying to get those caught up. Last year, they focused on the 4-, 5-, and 6-year audits for small towns and districts that just had not anybody in there, because they kind of got pushed to the bottom, and counties suffered because of that. But again, we're hiring people, we're trying to get people trained, we're trying to get back up to where we're doing what we're supposed to do. And so again, we appreciate your patience, and that is our goal. Hopefully that will happen. I can't guarantee that every county will be done, but we're really hoping that happens. Yeah, and I don't know if she'll, because basically she's over that, but then the audit coordinators all get together and allocate resources and manpower, set up a schedule, they give it to her. Where they are in that process, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, you can check with her. I don't know that she will always have the answer, but. Any other questions?
I still have a question on SA 67.
Okay.
The 100% of the money comes in, goes into that fund. Who makes the decision if they're going to release 25% into the rainy day or set up a special fund? Is the commissioner still in control? Couldn't they say, well, we're just going to use the whole 100%, we're not going to let you have 25%? Because that's an argument that's getting ready to start in the county.
I want to make sure we're clear. When the whole distribution comes into that 7315, it is allocated to every political subdivision. Each subdivision is going to make their own decision at that point.
Correct.
The county's allocation is a county decision. So the commissioners and the council need to agree on this. The commissioners can decide where it goes. The council's got to appropriate it. So it's still something that they've got to work together on.
Well, I agree with that, but it's still, the commissioners actually have the upper hand. They can say, well, we're going to keep it, you don't have to allocate it, we'll keep it anyway.
The statute doesn't say which body is responsible.
Right,
for
that's
making
what I'm
that
saying.
decision. So they
Yes,
got to work
it is
together.
going to be your county decision. If your commissioners, I mean, if it's a home rule fund, they'll set it up. If it's a change to the rainy day fund, they have the right to change that. But they're still going to have to get the appropriation, the additional appropriation from the council on that. What we fall back on it is if there is any question, because the statute doesn't state.
Right.
So if there's any question, then, I don't want to duke it out, but talk to your county attorney and try to figure out what's the best way to go with this. And we hope no one comes to blows over what do you do with that 25%.
So just to follow up to that question, if the decision on the 25% has not been made yet, we can keep that 25% just sitting in the, I think 7312 or 7315 fund. Or no, we move it to the other county fund and we just keep it preserved there until someone makes this decision on the 25%.
You probably want to get it out of the clearing
Okay,
fund.
okay.
But where you put it, if you don't have direction, I mean, what we're going to audit when we come in is that 75% was sent on the road projects, and putting all of it 100% in that fund, and at least 70. I mean, it becomes a tracking issue for you. You just have to still make sure that 75% is spent on that, and the other 25%. We're not going to have a finding if it's in that, but if it's in there, more than likely it's going to end up spent on road projects. So, I mean, if it takes 6 months to make a decision, it may be spent by then. I don't know, but.
It will take. Thank you.
I'll just add to that. We've had this question a couple of times because of the debate on who gets to decide. If you're pushed to where you have to clear that fund out and it needs to go somewhere, I've discussed this with Debbie a couple weeks ago. If you move that 25% over to the general fund and later they decide that they wanted it to go to the rainy day fund or a home rule fund, we at that point would call it an error correction, and then you could move that money from the general fund to whatever fund it should have went to.
Did you get the distinction? It's not a transfer, it's a correction of error. Yeah.
Will that take a special resolution to do that, or is that
As
something?
long as your rainy day ordinance allows for it to be, I mean, if, it probably does, at special distributions, because that's where they've gone in the past, no.
Okay.